Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. I'm Joey, and today Jennifer and I are going to do our June reading wrap up. So we're going to talk about and reminisce about all the stories that we have read in June. Okay, so let's start off with our normal questions. This month we read The Switchman by Juan Jose Arreola, Los Angeles by Ling Ma, The Hollow by Pemi Aguda, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Red Dirt Witch by N.K. Jemisin. So Jennifer, why don't you tell us what your favorite story was of the month and why it stuck out?
Why
to you.
it stuck out. It stuck out for me because the story that I loved most out of the stories that we read in June, and they were all great. It's really hard to pick a favorite when they're all stellar for their own reasons, but I think I would say Red Dirt Witch by N.K. Jemisin was a standout for me. I loved the earthiness, I loved the language, I loved the plot points. I loved the whole experience of being in that moment. I think there were so many cultural markers that were in there, so many things to reflect upon that I was like, man, she is just really, really a great author. And I'm feeling super grateful that she, although popular in other realms and in other conversations, just didn't make her way to me before we had exposed ourselves to her material here.
Yeah.
And just that's mine. How about you?
Yeah, and just real quick, that's our second story that we've read from her collection, How Long Till Black Future Month? Yeah, How Long Till Black Future Month. So we're just working our way down, apparently. We read The Ones Who Stay and Fight, and then we read Red Dirt Witch. Okay, my favorite one from this month was The Hollow by Pemi Aguda, because as I said in that episode, I swear it's one of the most perfect haunted house stories that I've ever read. It's not scary. I wouldn't say, like I said in the episode, it's not horrific. Well, there are some horrific things, but it's not supposed to scare you. It's not like a scary book like, The Exorcist or something. But I think it was so well done and so well crafted. Again, in such a short amount of time. Sometimes these authors, I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe you did that much world building and all of these things in such a short amount of time. But she did it, and you should read it. Not you, everyone else.
I need to amend my statement. I know that's such a shock to you. I was also thinking, like, what other stories are just really sticking with me? I loved A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I really, really loved it. And thinking about the larger historical context, was this about religion? Was this about morality? Was this about growing older? Was it about responsibility of the community to care for others? It's all in there. And I just really think for me, it was a reminder of the power of this beautiful magical realism, which we have talked about before. That angel falls down from heaven? Of course it does. A girl is in the guise of a tarantula. She has a tarantula body. Of course she does. And no one bats an eye. And I just really loved floating around in that otherworldliness, but also being very rooted into the smell of the sea and the crabs and just being very viscerally relatable. And then you have these elements that you're like, pardon me, what? There's a man with bat wings. There's an angel. I just really, really enjoyed that experience. And thank you for stretching me a little bit out of my comfort zone and letting us dance around with magical realism just one more time.
Well, you had already read Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Like, you read I can't remember something in Cholera.
Chronicle of a Death Foretold. And I loved it, but that felt less odd because it didn't feel like a religious overtone to it. But it did have a lot of what I'm going to call ESP-like coincidences. It's like, well, how did this happen? And how did all these storylines magically kind of weave together by little tiny details? But definitely something worth exploring. I know you mentioned 100 Years of Solitude was another one of his greats that I'm not ready for that yet, Joey.
Yeah, that's a time. Yeah, that's probably his
move.
Yeah, that's probably his most well-known work, I would say. I think most people have at least heard of that if they've heard of his name before. But it's a classic for a reason. I would be down to reread it. I've read it maybe 5 years ago or more. So who could say how I feel about it now? At the time, I was like, this is confusing. But I'm much smarter than I was 5 years ago. I have a refined literary palate now. All right. So our next question is, did you have any unexpected disappointments or surprising favorites?
So, Joey, The Switchmen for me turned out to be a surprisingly good story that, again, so much to think about. So many of these elements are like, wait, did that happen? Did that not happen? Some ambiguous items in the story. So I think I was unexpectedly delighted by that story. And I had pretty low expectations going in because I'm like, what is this even about?
Yeah. And what is it really about?
I know, it's like, and I'm still not prepared to answer that question. So I guess
Yeah,
we'll just have to linger.
It's about so many things. It's just, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's really about a guy waiting for a train. That's sort of the only thing it's really about. But I mean, themes and stuff. So something that's one that I'm sort of surprised with was that I loved The Hollow more than I loved Los Angeles by Ling Ma because, like I said, like I said last month, I had already read that whole collection, Bliss Montage, and I loved every single story. It's so rare for me to read an entire short story collection and love every single story. So I was surprised that I read The Hollow and was like, wow, this is actually my favorite of the month. But it really was. It was excellent. All of these stories are really great. All the stories we always read are good. So you should read all of them.
I have to agree with you, Joey. I do not regret any of the time that we have spent reading and discussing these stories, even when some of the topics that are brought up are a bit disturbing. So The Hollow was so good, and it has really lingered with me in the sense that my favorite character from all of the stories that we read that month was the house. I'm still trying to figure out what was the house's deal? How did it get its intelligence? How did it decide its morality? And I think we posed a question to ourselves of, we are seeing in this story that the house seems very protective of women towards men and outsiders who are being aggressive towards them in bad situations. But would the house have the same category of punishments if the roles were reversed? If it was a female who was perpetrating violence or just general unpleasantness to a man, would the house still say, yep, these are our morals, you're not great, off you go? I do not know, but that is something I'd love to contemplate. And for me, it's like, is this like an AI brain before they had an AI brain? Like, what criteria is it using to determine what's good behavior and what's not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in that story that the house's morality comes from the intention in which it was built, because the mother runs away from her abusive husband, stockpiled a bunch of money, and then built this house. So I feel like it had that in mind. Well, it's a house, I guess it's gonna have mine. But I think that's what was guiding it, was being like, the intention for this house was to be a sanctuary for a woman who is the victim of domestic abuse perpetrated by her husband, who is a man. Maybe that's why, I don't know. But I bet I mean, I'm sure that there could be like a million ideas of why that happened like that, but that's my thinking, at least.
Yeah, Joey, and it definitely holds up, because then we have that whole other side plot. And again, this sort of fantasy mixed reality where the house has its own consciousness, and that a young girl in the story had a sexual assault from a family member. She goes home, she blacks out the window, she destroys the drawing that they had done together, and the next day, magically, poof, his house actually crumbled to the ground and crushed him to death. I'm like, now that's some powerful, like, the pen is mightier than the sword, I guess. Like, her drawing, and she just wiped him out. And I just really thought that was very interesting about guilt and retribution and justified protection of people. If some people don't know how to conduct themselves well, what's their consequence?
Yeah. Well, I guess that answers our next question for you, which is which scene or character stuck out to you? So maybe, is that your answer? Is that the moment when the house crashes down on her uncle who had abused her?
That was one of the moments. I think it was There's a particular line, and I'm probably not going to say it correct, but the idea was the woman who made this house, she was running away, as you said, from a domestic abuse situation, and she had to do it in secret. So she said she would work really hard. She would go to the building site and she would wash off her skin because she didn't want her husband to smell this freshness, this excitement, this freedom that was building for her. And it's like she needed to make sure he literally could not sense that his reign of terror for her was about to be over. And I just really thought that was a beautifully evocative scene to say, you know, people say sometimes you can smell someone's fear. And in this case, it wasn't her fear. It was her jubilation of like, very, very soon, this will all be over. And I just thought that was just a really interesting plot point to put into the story. And it's just really been floating around in my brain since we read it.
I think she says that the author says that she didn't want her husband to smell the new beginnings, which I still think genius. No one knows what new beginnings smell like, but we all get the idea. And I also said in that episode that is what I think is poetic writing without being actually poetic. So maybe like more purple prose or something, and not trying too hard. That was the perfect line for what she was trying to describe. And sometimes you're like, what the hell? That doesn't, like, if another writer tries something like that, you end up being like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And you know it doesn't. Like,
cop out.
Yeah, I can't even think. There's so many, like, silly lines where I'm like, I get what you were trying to do, but that's not what happened. Not to discourage writers from trying to do that, because you should. And if you do it successfully like Pema Aguda does, then by all means, I'm ready to read it. But it's hard to do. She does it well. But I will say that the part that stuck out for me is it's sort of hard, again, because we read very good stories. But I will say that it's not from The Hollow. It's from A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings. And it's when the old man, the titular old man with the enormous wings, is living in a chicken coop in like the backyard or whatever of this family's house that he fell down from the heavens and is sort of living with, because it's such a vivid image. When I think all of his stories are very vivid by themselves anyway, but I think it was easy to imagine this very decrepit old man with wings that the mud would never wash out, who was just like filthy dirty and just stuck in a small chicken coop. Now, I've seen some nice chicken coops, okay? One of my cousins who lives in Pennsylvania has a chicken coop that looks like a little house, and it's so cute. We're all her chickens. But I don't think that was the one. I think it was like a maybe a not nice one. But yeah, it was a very reminiscent of Kafka and a Hunger Artist, depending on your translation. It made me think of that, where you're putting this person on display to have some financial luck there. There was a monetary benefit to the family to have him locked up in there, and it was like a weird private zoo. I'm just like, okay, I don't know, but yeah, that's what stuck out to me is in that story.
Yeah, that is. I do remember that part of our conversation, Joey, and you were you made a very clear point that was something that I hadn't considered, is that maybe this was a fallen angel, or there was like the dirtiness of the physical realm that he could not shake, right? He could not ever wash that tarnish off of him. And I thought that was also just an interesting question to explore.
I believe I said it was the devil too.
I wasn't going to use the D word, but
you should. Satan. I thought it was Satan.
You did say it was Satan. I was like, I don't know, it's not. So
I
let's
stand
go with
by that. Okay.
Until Joey, and then I'm going to say, no, it was an angel, because it flew away and became a dot on the horizon, and it went back to where it came from, and everyone could contemplate what that's supposed to mean.
Is Satan never depicted with wings? I don't actually know. I feel like I've maybe seen any depiction of the devil with wings. I don't know. A good question, because I don't know. Anybody that does know, please let me know. Okay,
yeah, let us know. We'd love to hear about it.
In the comments below. Okay, what is one story that you're excited to read next month? So next month, we're going to be reading Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark, Cages by Abdul Gurna, Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, 3 Drops of Blood by Sadegh Hedayat.
Yeah, that sounds really great, Joey. And just in hearing the authors that we have chosen, I do not recognize any of these names from my previous reading. So really excited to dive into some new to me, maybe also new to you, probably new to a lot of people, authors in July.
Do you have one in particular that you're most excited for?
So I am excited about Three Drops of Blood because it is by a Persian writer, and that is something that we have not, that's a culture that we have not explored in our podcast so far, and I'm just really curious about how that story is going to unfold. So
It's messed up.
good.
It's pretty messed up. So that's why I was like, you sure you're excited about that one?
So thank you for saying that. So yes, sight unseen, little sight unseen. I am thinking this is going to be an amazing story. So we will see. We will see.
I really like it. We're gonna find out how you feel about it.
Right? Read around and find out, Joey.
Yeah, read around and find out. That's hilarious. Okay, I would say that I really am looking forward to all of the stories as per usual, but I'm really excited to talk about Convenience Store Women because oddly enough, I've read a lot of books 5 years ago. I can see when I read them on my story graph. But I really love that story, and I think what can I say without giving it? It's not really, you can't really spoil it. What I really am excited to talk about is what I think the story is really supposed to be talking about, or one of the themes, which is how do we define success and what does that definition look like? Is that a subjective definition? Because I think we can look at The Hollow for an example of this, because in that story, the author tries to define what a house is, and the definition changes based on who the character is and what their lived experience and their circumstances are in that moment. How do they define a house? Is it a benevolent thing, or is it a source of happiness or something like that? And I think it really interests me when stories try to discover what does it mean to be successful, and is it correct to ever try and push someone to do something that does not align with what they think it means to be successful for them. And I think the main character of that story, I have obviously already read it. As I said, I read it 5 years ago. But I have a pretty good memory of it. I'm just excited to see how I feel about that now that I'm a little bit old. I'm 5 years older. And how I align with that character. I would draw parallels between that book and Kazuo Ishiguro's The Remains of the Day, because I think that's a similar theme as like the main character is trying to figure out like what is success, and he reflects in that book. If you've never read it, he's reflecting on his life and is like, was this successful? Was I correct in following what I thought was correct at the time? So I think I just read them close to each other, and that's why I draw those parallels. But it's a really good story. It's super short. It's also a novella. I guess we're reading 2 novellas this month. We're not a novella channel though, or a novel channel, so don't get it twisted. We're short stories, but we do like to read novellas too because they're a little longer, but they're fun.
Joey, I'm laughing because when we talk about novellas, I'm like, well, it's the summer. We might have more leisure time to read longer pieces. So it's like they're just really long short stories. So we're not even going to pretend. We're just going to say really, really long short stories.
Yeah, I mean, longer short stories are like 100 pages or a little more, and Ring Shot's like a little less than 200. So that's basically a short story, sort of. All right, last question. What is something that you're reading outside of our podcast, whether they're short stories, novellas, or novels, that you have been reading and getting into?
So Joey, I am so excited, and this is also just a very funny coincidence. I am reading Howard's End by Forster, and he obviously is someone we have talked about on this channel before, and his wonderful participation in the Bloomsbury Group and the association with Virginia Woolf, and it's just I'm 10 chapters into like maybe a 40 chapter book, so I'm a quarter of the way through and I'm just really loving it. But the funny coincidence is, Joey, I always get the title The Remains of the Day and that story because I think it was a movie that came out possibly at the same time Howard's End came out. So when I picked up the book and I'm reading Howard's End, I was thinking it was the storyline that was in the other book. So I'm like, this
isn't about a butler.
I expected at all. There's no butler. Nobody is having the butler job here. And I was like, oh, right. That's just one that I very frequently just flip the script on that. It's like if I have literary dyslexia, if there's a way to like interject a storyline that doesn't belong there, it's like, oh, right, the names of those two books you keep consistently, and it's a consistent mistake I make. I keep cross-referencing them. But now that I am swimming around in the beautiful, beautiful writing of Forster, I will never make that mistake again, perhaps.
I think the adaptation is with both adaptations for Howard's End and The Remains of the Day are with Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson. So
I wasn't so
that could, they're both in it.
Yeah. So thank you, Joey, for coming to my rescue. And they're very, at this point, those were done decades ago, right? At least a decade ago. It's not a contemporary thing. But one treat that I normally don't talk about here is that reading a book and then watching a really great adaptation of it is wonderful. But I have to do the work first before I'm going to rewatch those films because I literally do not remember anything about either of them. So, looking forward to exploring those tie-ins and see if they remain faithful to the book. And I'm ready to get my money out, Joey. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna bet you this $50 bill right here that the book is going to smoke the movies. I'm sure the movies are great.
I don't know. The movie is really good. I mean, I love both, but I think like the actors in it, like Anthony Hopkins, Emma Thompson, Helena Bonham Carter's in it, in Howard's End. There's a lot of like really talented actors in it that it's like they showed up in this one. But that's a great book. I love E.M. Forster, as I have said many times. I've read quite a few of his novels. I don't know. I've never tried to think which one was my favorite that I've read so far of his. I think it might be Howard's End. I don't know. I have to think about that now. A Passage to India is really good, and so is A Room with a View. So I don't know. I feel like I'd have to reread them. I read Howard's End twice, though, so that one must be my favorite because it's the only one I've reread.
Yeah, well, I will take that challenge and say that why don't we think about reading some Forster together, because I am mesmerized is the wrong word, but I'm reading an electronic copy and I'm highlighting like 3/4 of the sentences on a page. And it's like, this is going to be a long haul for me, but it has just been so evocative and beautiful and not overdone. And there's humor in it. And I was not expecting the humorous parts and a little bit of cattiness, a little bit of observation. I was like, excuse me, sir, you're being a little catty right now. He's like, oh, it wasn't me. It's the characters. I'm like, Who put those words in that mouth? You did.
Howard's End gets messy. Like, those characters get in it. Like, I'm just like, girl, this is a mess, but it's fun. It's fun to read.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to getting to the mess.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hear what you think about it. And maybe I'll reread it. I don't know. Who knows? So on my outside reading, I've also been reading more short stories, is the case. Which most of them I don't even bring up because I'm like, oh, that was fun. But like, maybe I don't need to discuss that one. But I just finished reading All Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, who is behind my chair again. Son of a bitch. There he is. Right there. Razorblade Tears and All Sinners Bleed. So I've talked about Razorblade Tears to a lot of people. I recommend it all the time because it's such a great book. And I usually am not like a huge thriller fan because I think sometimes they're not that well written. But All Sinners Bleed was fantastic. And he is such a good writer that it sort of borders on literary fiction at times, like the prose style. Not so much like the character development because obviously plot heavy. It's all plot. It's a thriller. But he does such a beautiful job of writing. And this one, All Sinners Bleed, really does a great job of blending Greek mythology with Christian doctrine in such a strange pairing. Like, how did you think of that? But it worked out so well. I highly recommend it. It's messed up because it's a thriller. And it starts with a school shooting, and I was like, oh my God, this is a little too real. Okay, I don't. But then it goes off from there, and you're like, I did not see this coming. But it's fantastic, and I'm actually now I'm reading another one of his novels, and another one is coming in the mail. So I'm having a time.
That is awesome, Joey. And so speaking of novels that start out with things that you're like, really? Are we going there? Is this where we're starting our conversation? Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. That was my reaction as well. It's like, say what? Is this? Okay, we're in it. And it does take a surprising turn of events. So I'm very excited to explore that story with you. And I think you've convinced me to read the S.A. Crosby. I think that's going to happen.
The Razorblade Tears or All Sinners Bleed?
Well, Razorblade Tears was gifted to me by my amazing friend Joey, and I have
I was going to say, didn't I give you that?
It's on my shelf, but the one you just talked about, which is
All Sinners Bleed?
All Sinners Bleed. I couldn't get the words out of my life. So I am also very much looking forward to reading All Sinners Bleed. Gave it a great endorsement. So let's see, Joey.
Everyone loves S.A. Cosby, and they should because he's amazing. I think actually his newest novel just got picked up by, I think Netflix for an adaptation. So I have to hurry up and read it before it gets spoiled by an adaptation.
The clock is ticking, Joey. And speaking of clock ticking, it is now time for us to wrap this up. But before we go, I definitely want to remind our listeners that we have a website, which will also give you access to what we're reading each week. And so if you're curious about what's coming up next and what the schedule looks like, you can definitely check it out there. Okay, stopping.